Good afternoon, everybody. We're live. Welcome to Power Session. Just grabbing some of my supplies, markers and eraser to get ready to roll. Excited to be back for another Power Session. These are a highlight of my week. For those of you who didn't get a chance to see last week's, from what I've been hearing from everybody else, it's definitely worth going back and watching. It was on your survival guide to a crappy day, which quite honestly, if you couldn't quite tell from what I was sharing, is last Tuesday I was having a crappy day in terms of how I was feeling, how I was reacting to it, the kind of impact it was having on me. And so I was literally sitting there at 11:59, because I go live right around 12 o'clock Mountain Time. It was 11:59 Mountain Time. And I was like, you know what? I don't feel like doing a power session. I really don't feel like jumping on and doing this. And I've never not done one like that. Now, I've had to cancel one before because there was no way I could work it out in my schedule with some travel and other challenges. Usually I get pretty creative when I'm traveling. For those of you who have been in these power sessions with me for the last several years that I've been doing them, it wasn't until the start of this year that we started doing them here on Facebook Live for the public, which has been super fun. The response, the friends that we've been able to make, the impact we've been able to make for people who are just looking for an opportunity to start making, some movement in the right direction in their life, and looking forward to that, working into getting to work with you at a higher and higher level, or also simultaneously a deeper and deeper level in our group coaching, our personal coaching. Everything has been super fun. But in the 4 years that I've been doing power sessions every Tuesday, I can count on one hand the number of weeks that I've missed. And so it was really a weird experience to be in that space. Then I immediately just put it to work. I did one of the most challenging things that any of us can ever do that are in a position of leadership, a position of coaching or mentoring. And I said, what would I tell myself right now? How would I coach me through this right now? And just kind of step back and just wrote down, what are the, four most important things that I'm going to want to do as soon as this power session is over. And in fact, one of the four things was doing the power session was to connect. I got a chance to connect with all of you. That was one of the four things in the survival guide. So if you missed that one, go back in the Habit Finder video section on the Habit Finder Facebook page, and go back and watch the Sometimes Life Sucks Habit Finder, the power session live. So anyway, thanks for being with us this week, talking about some really fun stuff, some things that came from some conversations I had with some clients over the last week, from a speech I gave at the Rise Up Summit over the weekend in Anaheim, which was super fun. One place I want to start though, because the top priority in what we do every day, the number one priority, and for those of you who, and I hear this from a lot of people that want to work on time management is a myth and a fallacy and a dumb one, in fact. Becoming good at time management is overrated and useless. What you want to do is become good at priority management. So what I want to share with you is your number one priority, meaning what should be consuming your awareness and your consciousness, because so many things stem from this. Number one is the quality of your energy. That is absolutely, unequivocally your number one priority. If you want to be a great leader, you want to be a great salesperson, you want to be a great parent, you want to be a great spouse, you want to be a great friend, the quality of your energy is everything. Now, it's interesting because number two is what you don't do, the things you don't do because they negatively impact the quality of your energy. And number three is what you actually do so that you can continue to support the quality of your energy. But most people start with number three, with what they're doing. So, but I wanted to share something before we dive into the four most important habits that you can build that I hope will impact the quality of your energy, because it certainly impacted mine. And I've been enjoying just reminiscing and thinking over and over again about that experience. And that was when I got the opportunity to speak in Anaheim this last weekend. I got there early Friday morning. And then spent the day in the event, which was day 2 of the event. I couldn't get out there on Thursday because when my dad and I are asked to come and participate in an event, both of us together or one of us alone, we want to be a part of the event. We want to be in it. We don't fly in, speak, fly out. We don't, book other things around it. We want to be a part of the event. That's how I was taught. And that's really an opportunity to be able to sink into the event and be open to the inspiration and the flow and the quality of the energy of the event so that we can best serve. Because my dad and I never give the same speech twice. We may talk about similar topics, but we never deliver, the same exact speech every time. And so super fun to be a part of that. But we're down in Anaheim, and we're at a hotel that is literally like you could throw a rock and hit the Matterhorn at Disneyland. As you pull out of the parking lot, you can see the back end of it. And so we're sitting there, and I went through the event all day on Friday, and then on Saturday I got up early, and I was speaking on Saturday. They asked me to come in and do the demo spot, which is my favorite, closing keynote, because we get to talk about all the things that are going to happen Monday morning after an event like this. We get to talk about how the brain works and how to be able to really start gaming it back. And it was a really fun conversation. Even talked a little bit about one of my favorite motivational speakers of all time, who I think is the greatest motivational speaker of all time, who is Matt Foley, who lives in a van down by the river. For those of you who were there live, got to see Matt Foley played out as one of my favorite impressions, talking about how I think we're going to get out there and grab life by the tail and whip it around and put it in our pocket. But when you get out in the real world, you aren't going to amount to jack squat, as Matt Foley would say. That's what I think of at the end of events. So anyway, just thinking about the energy and the flow and where people are at. And the reason I call it the demo spot is because it's the building's clear and time to set the dynamite and blow the place up, obviously in a really good, productive, and helpful way. Because I really want to see people take an emotional peak experience like an event like that and be able to use it well. And the quality of their energy is super important to that. And mine had been set in stone. The quality of my energy was in such a good place. And here's why. I got up super early for whatever reason. I think it's hereditary, just genetic. My dad does this. Maybe it was subliminal. And so I started doing it. But just waking up at about 4 a.m. before we're going to speak. And it's always 4 local time, strangely enough. But I remember vividly almost every speech I've ever given, waking up and looking at the clock and seeing it's 4 something and laying in this state, this half sleeping, half awake state, just wanting to feel the audience. What is it that we've been brought here to teach and to share? And incredible ideas and inspirations, sometimes just things impacting energy, sometimes things that we actually want to execute come in that space. And then I got up and I went to the gym. And so that was great. That was all typical, okay? In terms of that kind of mental rehearsal, checking in with the amazing gift of our mind that can go 100 miles into the future, way ahead of our current reality at any moment, and using that constructively, like we teach our clients, to be able to find what it is that this audience deserves to hear, the best way I can serve them. But then it was time to get up and go work out. I love to get a good workout in the morning before I speak. So I went and worked out in the gym. And then for whatever reason, I just had this feeling to go for a walk. Whether it was to cool down, it was a beautiful Saturday morning in Southern California. So I think it was like 72 degrees outside. The sun was just starting to come up. And so I just started making laps around the hotel. I just walked out the front of the hotel and then just started going around. And it's only 3 stories high, but tons of suites. So it's very spread out and spidered out. So I knew I'd cover some good distance to just go all the way around the grounds. And as I was doing this, I had the most unexpected experiences. And it seems obvious now, just thinking thinking in retrospect, but we're at a hotel right next to Disneyland. As I'm walking around, even this early in the morning, I get to start seeing kids walking out of their hotel rooms with their parents, and it's like their feet can't stay on the ground. They're just floating. They're skipping. They're so giddy and so excited. And it was emotional to watch. Just thinking about it right now gets me emotional. Just to see the quality of the energy that these kids had. They were going to the most magical place on earth, to a place that countless of billions of views on YouTube have created videos of when parents share with their kids that they're going to Disneyland. And here we are right there, the hotel right across the street from Disneyland, with these kids waking up to fulfill the biggest dream of their lives up to that point, to go to the Magic Kingdom, to go to Disneyland, to see their favorite characters and princesses and everything else. And it was just amazing to just walk and watch these kids and the quality of their energy, the wonder, the awe. They didn't have a care in the world. And to watch some of these parents getting to kind of partake in the joy that their kids were having, maybe remembering what it was like when they were that age. I hope that they got that, just a little taste of that, because I can't think of a higher quality of energy than what I got to experience that morning, that could dictate the things that don't support that kind of energy, that kind of wonder, that kind of awe for the world, that kind of curiosity about what's possible, to inquire and to ask and to wonder and to create. Such a beautiful place, and an opportunity to be able to understand what we might be doing to ourselves to detract from that. And what came to me as I was walking around, as I was on my way back to my hotel room, was how often are we taking ourselves too serious? How often are we taking ourselves, our challenges, our problems, our obstacles, our overwhelm, and essentially ourselves, too serious? So before we dive into the 4 habits that I think are the most powerful that you personally can ever build, I want to make sure you take a second and stop and pause and check in with the quality of your energy. And if you're having a crappy day, jump back and watch the power session from last week and be able to get some really practical, really simple tips for being able to experience your crappy day. It wasn't about snapping out of a crappy day. You don't just do that, okay? It was about experiencing it. And the more we give ourselves permission to experience ourselves, I'm in awe of how naturally we don't take ourselves serious. Now, those of you who have been on more than one power session know that I am a massive fan of words and their meaning and their roots and their Proto-Indo-European everything. Say that 10 times fast. But getting into serious, of course, as I ask myself this question, how often am I taking myself too seriously? And how much do I do that ends up leading to a crappy day? So I wanted to dive into the word serious, and I wanted to understand it a little bit more. And I found out that the Proto-Indo-European root, the PIE root of serious, is sero. And the root sero means heavy and slow. This is S-E. Heavy and slow is the root of the word serious. And I went, oh, of course it is. So we get an opportunity that we're taking ourselves too seriously when we're missing some of the beautiful things that Mandino wrote about in scroll number 7. I will laugh at the world, meaning I will not take myself too seriously. Is the core message of that. I will not allow my life to be slow and heavy. The complete opposite of these kids I got to see walking around this hotel before they went to Disneyland, like they were floating and just skipping, and it was tremendous. It was amazing. Like it was like Tinkerbell had already putting the magic dust on them, and they were starting to float with their parents holding on to them as anchors. It was so fun to watch. Give yourself permission to check in and just let go of some of the slow and heavy. As Mandino said in scroll 7, what can happen today that will be no more than a drop in the river of centuries? What can happen today that will be no more than a drop in the river of centuries? Such a beautiful question to ask yourself, to be able to let go of some of the slow and heavy elements of our life, not because they are slow and heavy, the things we're experiencing, but because we've either been taught that they should feel slow and heavy, we're asking questions that result in slow and heavy answers, or we've got unhealthy habits of thinking, which stems from all of those things that are creating a reality that feels slow and heavy. I would challenge you, regardless of what we talk about today, if whatever caught your attention in terms of these four habits that are phenomenal and amazing, are going to be worth you sticking around and listening, but just giving yourself permission to step back and check in with you and think of those kids on their way to Disneyland and the invitation that we all have to live life like that every day. We may not get to stay in that space. And I'm sure several of those kids I saw bouncing around didn't get to buy the Mickey Mouse, stuffed animal that they wanted, or got tired and frustrated later in the day. It wasn't all perfect, but they started the day that way. And then getting a chance to check in with that throughout the day, because we're not looking to do any of this perfect. There are going to be days where our quality of energy is just crap. There's going to be days where we're taking ourselves too serious and we don't feel like considering any other option. But giving ourselves permission to at least get back to that place of wonder and awe and curiosity, and see if we can't just stay there a little bit longer, where it almost feels like our soul is defying gravity because of the permission we're giving ourselves to surrender the seriousness, the slow and heavy parts of our life. Okay, so wanted to start there. Hope that is beneficial for everybody, regardless of where you're at and what industry you're in and what you're focused on. Now, basic principles. Number one, thinking is everything, okay? Your thinking determines your reality. Now, that's your reality, not the reality. Huge important principle to remember, okay? That your reality, we've talked about this on here before, does not equal the reality. The sooner you surrender that, the sooner you can invite peace and happiness and joy and productivity and efficiency and clarity and precision into your life. And those are some pretty awesome things to invite into your life. Because there are a few things that cause more frustration, more overwhelm, more poor assumptions and bad decisions than believing that your reality is the reality. So always going to remind you of that. That's super important, okay? And that reality is created by your thoughts, okay? And your thoughts are as far upstream as you can get in terms of what you are developing to be able to create a better reality. If you want a better reality, this makes for a really beautiful and simple equation. All you've got to do is add better thinking. Now, this isn't just thinking about better things. This is better thinking, and there's a big difference. Thinking about better things is optimism, okay? Optimism for most entrepreneurs, most business leaders, is used as lidocaine, used as a fresh coat of paint on a rotting fence post. So we're going to want to remember that better thinking is not the same as thinking about better things. We can think about better things all day long and get lost in fantasy, or come crashing down into thinking about how those are never going to happen and all the things that are keeping us from that being able to be a reality, and worrying and catastrophizing, all kinds of things. But what we want is a better reality, is better thinking habits. Better thinking habits. What are the patterns of the way that you think? And if we're going to shift our thinking habits, our thinking patterns, the first thing we're going to want to do, of course, is measure them. And that's the premise of everything we're doing here. You're here listening to a Power Session presentation on the Habit Finder Facebook page, which is the proprietary technology that we use, that we've spent millions of dollars and thousands of hours honing with over 150,000 entrepreneurs and business leaders to be able to measure your thinking habits. Because your thinking habits are currently creating your reality. And most people that come to us, all of them in fact, want something in their reality to be better. Some part of it, whether their relationships, their income, their finances, their health, their vitality, something they want to be better. And they're very clear about what it is, whether they admit it to people or not. And we know the simple equation is if you want a better reality, you need better thinking habits. It's really that simple. But in order to improve better thinking habits, we need to know which thinking habits need improvement, and which thinking habits could be there to support you that you're not utilizing currently. They're natural strengths of yours, your gifting, your genius, to be able to tap into that. And that's different for everyone. That's why we measure over 6 quadrillion variables in your thinking habits so that we can improve these things. Now, in order to improve thinking habits, we need to understand a few rules about the brain. Quick review, and then we're going to cover the 4 most important habits you can build in terms of your progression, in terms of creating better thinking habits, okay? Now, the first piece is that the brain has one goal. And this is review for those of you who have been on these with me before, but it can't be stated too many times. And that is that your brain has one goal. Number one, keep you safe. The most important thing, and it's hard-coded, deepest, most carnal part of your brain, the fight or flight, the amygdala, the core center of its programming, that's the strongest influence over your behavior, is to keep you safe. Which sounds nice, except for, and those of you who have been in here before know that this actually means keeping you predictable. That is the best way that your brain can keep you safe, is to keep you predictable. Because if it knows what's coming, it knows how best to avoid it or to engage it without needing to use extra amounts of energy for something it wasn't expecting. So understand that anytime you want a better reality, and we know that a better reality equals better thinking. Not just better thinking, but better thinking habits, that we know we're going to run head on into this part of the brain. Because it's the most natural, default, simplest core operating system of your brain, is to keep you safe. And so if we want a better reality, we need to create better thinking. All your brain sees is a different reality, and that means different thinking. And different, alarm, 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 is not predictable. Okay? Have you seen The Croods? Okay, the cartoon about the prehistoric family. Nicolas Cage is the voice of the father. Emma Stone's the voice of the daughter. It's hilarious. But they always freak out about something new. Something new! Ah! Because, I mean, back then, something new would more than likely kill you. Very carnal times, and developed a lot of the carnal parts of our brain. So we want a better reality, which we know better thinking. Our conscious mind's going, yeah, that sounds good. Let's start thinking about that. But the brain says, no, that better is different. It doesn't care that our pleasure center, it doesn't care that our conscious mind can go, oh, that would be so much better. That would feel so much better. All it hears is different, different, alarm, alarm. And it starts deploying resistance to making sure that your reality stays the same, which means your thinking has got to stay the same. What are some of its favorite weapons for doing so? Fear. It uses fear, loves to use confusion, which is the cousin of complexity. Okay, loves to use stress and overwhelm. Loves to use fantasy. Because if it can say, okay, you want a different reality? Then just think about it. Remember, that's the difference. We're not thinking about better things. We're actually creating better thinking. Because your brain can think about better things right now without changing anything about your reality. It's one of the hardest things to go against. Because then our brain will have us thinking about how much better it'll be once we change our reality. But we don't think about what it actually takes to think differently, because oftentimes we can't on our own. It's impossible. Einstein said that the mind that created a problem cannot solve that problem. We need some kind of outside influence to be able to create this better thinking. But the brain will hack this. We'll game the system. Okay, you want a better reality? Well, don't get better thinking. Just think about a better reality. And then we go into fantasy. We dream about how great our life will be when. And it even feels like we've got a better reality. Over 90% of you on this call have an ability measured in the habit finder that when it's over-focused, you can effortlessly do this. You can go, okay, I want a better reality, so I'm going to think about it being better. And so we start visualizing it. That's where it starts. But then we start living it out up here, which the brain loves, because that means nothing's actually changing, other than we get a chance to get a little bit of a euphoric high from thinking about how great our life will become. And then we play out, oh, it'll be so wonderful. I'll be able to do this. I'll be able to pay off my debt. It'll be so awesome. We think we're exploring our why, when really we're exploring why we'd love to escape from our life right now, not a why that's worth passion-driven action, just why we'd love to get away from where we're currently at. And so our brain gets us into this loop of predictability. Okay, better reality, just think about it. Don't actually create a different thought process, a different pattern, because then we're not being predictable. So you're naturally going to run into fear, confusion, complexity, stress, overwhelm, fantasy. What my life will be like when? Where we're just thinking about better things rather than creating better thinking. This is the mess we find ourselves in this life. This is why so many people don't create their dreams. Because you've got a brain that's got a game plan that is the opposite of creating dreams. It's the opposite of growth, the opposite of the additional healthy habits that will help you get there. Now, most of you, almost all of you, don't have an overhaul to do. It's not like your life is completely poisoned by mostly bad habits. Okay? If you've got a fairly functional life, okay? Even a lot of people that have a dysfunctional life and are still alive, that means most of your habits are still pretty good. That means most of your life is still pretty predictable. You're still alive. So let's give ourselves a break, okay? And not feel like every time we read a personal development book or go to an event that we are so far away from the person we need to become to create our dreams, because it's so not true. Now, as we start to game this system, we're going to want to understand that one of the greatest weapons we have in terms of taking on this brain's desire to be safe is that we have this conscious mind, we have metacognition, which allows us to take our thoughts, and we actually get to stand here and observe our thoughts. We can actually think about our own thoughts, okay? This is metacognition. Fancy word, but that's really all it means. Is we have a buffer between what we're thinking and the actions we decide to make. And it's in these moments when we recognize that the thoughts we're thinking do not support our better reality. When we realize that they don't support it, we can more consciously make a decision to go the other direction, rather than coming down here and just thinking about thinking about what we didn't do, what we should have done, what we wish was different, all these different things that we get pulled into this abyss. This right here, this decision, so here's you, your true self, metacognition, your thoughts, and this decision to either go here and choose the pattern, choose the action that will create a better reality, or choose to go back into the loop of the mind, keeping you predictable. This right here, that's personal development. Because that is where you are literally developing the person you are. You are developing your habits of thinking. Whereas the things here that improve metacognition, like reading books, coaching, events, all of this is preparation for improved metacognition, but still they don't make the decision for you. It doesn't actually make the decision for you. You still have to face this. And here's the other frustrating element, okay, to the brain seeking predictability, that as soon as you make this decision, you are now immediately in place. Let me give you a visual for this. Okay, so we're coming just to this part right here, where we make the decision to create a better reality. And here's the decision, okay? Here's the decision to make a better reality or to go back into old patterns. And let's say we decide to make a better reality. Guess what we immediately run into? Another decision to make a better reality or go back to our old thinking. And then let's say we make another good decision. Now we're facing another one, a better reality or go back into our old thinking. So if we choose a better reality, but then we choose our old habit of thinking, then we choose our old habit of thinking, and we choose our old habit of thinking. Why? Because we're beating ourselves up because we couldn't choose our better reality every single time because we had perfect expectations, and then we end up here lower than where we started. Whereas we choose a better reality, surrender to an old habit of thinking. Now I've got a new choice. Rather than just surrender and fall down like we're playing Plunko, okay? We have an opportunity to get back up on the upswing. These are the ups and downs, the undulations, but should be a consistent trajectory to being able to create success. Now, that's kind of our prerequisite discussion. So that if any of you who have never seen any of these power sessions could jump in here, you could get some context as to why we're talking about habits of thinking, why we're talking about thinking patterns, why we don't spend as much time on your personality and your behaviors, because those things come naturally. Those things already exist. Okay, those things are going to happen as symptoms and as representations and manifestations of how you think and how conscious and aware you are of how you're thinking. So you want a better reality, better thinking habits. Okay, so now that you become aware of this game and you can start going through it progressively, and the greatest strategy to that game, okay, is frequency, not intensity. For example, I had a horrendous back injury right before Thanksgiving, and I had an even worse one a year before that. 3 slit discs, a couple annular tears. It wasn't pretty. Put me on my back for weeks and weeks over a year ago, and then the one right before Thanksgiving, I was on narcotics and muscle relaxers 3 times a day just to be able to get through the week. And then finally got a cortisone shot and got better. But I've been really conscious of taking a lot better care of my body since the second one, which I had been for a while after the first one. But then I started slipping into old patterns. I stopped being conscious of the better reality I wanted to have with my back. And I started making decisions in the short term rather than considering the long term, and it caught up with me. So interesting. But it's so important to understand that in that rehab, in rebuilding my body, that frequency is so much more important than intensity. For example, I went back to a Hybrid X class yesterday, taught by one of my favorite people and professional trainers, okay, Tyler, who's just one of my favorite human beings on the planet, especially in fitness and mobility. And just there's just a handful of those people that have just really poured into themselves and poured into their knowledge and their understanding and are able to apply it to other people in an amazing way. And Tyler does that incredibly. But it had been about probably 6 months since I had had any kind of lower body exercise other than walking on an incline treadmill. I'd done plenty of upper body exercise because that was still treating me well. And I knew I could do things that could still protect my back, but still really push my strength and everything. But lower body, I hadn't really done much. And so I jumped in the Hybrid X class, and there were some lateral sidestepping. There was some glute bridges with a barbell on your waist. There was a handful of things that I knew were going to push my limits in my lower body. And I got to a point where I was being very conscious, very aware, very metacognitive of what I was doing to my lower body, and knew that I was in this for frequency. Whereas my ego loves to drive to intensity. Now, I got to bring intensity to the frequency I was doing, but I also got to have the long-term vision that I wanted to be able to come back the next day. And I wanted to still be able to walk today. I'm sore, but I'm in a really manageable position, in a really manageable space, because I was being conscious of where I was at, of not pushing too far, so that my brain, in this case my body, didn't deploy extreme tactics to keep me safe. Same thing in your personal development. You want to be very aware of how hard you're pushing yourself and know where you can push and when you can push. And that determination is not just made by this, because this, when you really hone it in, when you really practice, when you really study hard, this can always outlast this. It can always outperform your body. But your body's going to win in the end. It's the vehicle. Doesn't matter how powerful an engine is. If the vehicle that it sits in breaks down, then the engine can't do anything. You take 4 wheels off and suddenly the powerful engine doesn't matter. It can't get anywhere. So in being able to connect and align both, understand that frequency, not intensity, is the key to what we're doing. And that leads us to the 4 habits that you're going to want to focus on first. If any of you are having a hard time building habits, being able to build things in, maybe you're building a business and you're trying to work on your health, which was part of the conversation that led to wanting to talk about this today. Then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to focus on the first place that you should focus on. And this is in the practicality. This is in the physical creation of your life. Okay, these are, now that you've become more aware of your thinking habits, now that you've become more metacognitive, now that you've really started to give a chance, if you haven't taken a habit finder, then go take it right now and then come back and pick up where you left off in this session. You're going to want to know what thinking habits are involved. If you haven't coached with us, you're going to want to dive deeper to be able to really construct this. But for those of you who have been in this for a while, for those of you that have coached with us, for those of you that have coached with other people that support creating a better reality, and yet are having a hard time being able to spin more than just a couple plates, these are the 4 places you're going to want to focus. And they are called Cornerstone habits. Cornerstone habits. Cornerstone is a term that comes from building a foundation. Foundation for a building, a foundation for a house, whatever it is. We're building ourselves and we're going to follow similar principles. We're not a house, we're not a building. Okay, we're intrinsic. All of those things are extrinsic. We're of a much higher mathematical dimension. I get all that. But the principles can be applied beautifully to constructing your life. Okay? And once you've become aware of the thought processes, the thinking patterns that are keeping you stuck at this reality, and you've started to understand how to become more aware of that thinking and principles and practices to be able to shift it, then in practicality and application, I highly recommend you start with Cornerstone habits, which comes from, if you had a vertical view, okay, let's say this is the slab, this is the foundation. It comes from, 100 years ago, when they couldn't just show up with a big, truck that turns concrete and keeps it loose and just pours it into it. What they would do is build foundations with stones. And they would lay big, huge stones down as a foundation to build the building on to keep it stable so that they could build it higher, so they could build it stronger. And the first stones that you always put in, no matter what, is the cornerstones. This stone goes in first. Then this stone goes in. Then this stone goes in. And this stone goes in. The first stone is the most important. Okay? If this one isn't square, this one isn't aligned, it doesn't matter about the rest of the foundation. It's going to be off and it's not going to fit. But I highly recommend that you find and understand that as we break this down, there is the cornerstone habit. But I also like to teach in having each of the corners covered, okay? If we were actually building a building today, we would just put this one in place and then build off of it, down, over to the side, everything else. But in context of building our lives, we have multiple dimensions, so there are 4 cornerstones we're going to want to have in place. Now, the cornerstone for you could be different, okay? Mine is getting up early in the morning and going to work out. That is the cornerstone for me and the way that I think and what I emotionally connect with. That is the cornerstone. That I know that no matter how things are coming down on me, how life is playing out, that if I'm doing that is in place, that I know that I have the best chance of building success with the rest of the foundation. So in order to give you an idea of finding out what your cornerstone is, what the first one for you should be, and then you're going to want to build in the other 4 corners after that, let me share with you what they are. Now, this is not what they have to be for you in terms of the cornerstone, okay? But it'll be one of these 4, okay? The first one is business. And this is not in order of importance. These are just what the 4 cornerstones are. And you want to figure out what yours is. The second one is health. That's the second cornerstone that could be your cornerstone. Number 3 is the mind. Number 4 is the spirit. That's one of these 4 cornerstones. And what you want to do is you want to figure out which one is your cornerstone. What's the first block that you know from your experience, and some of you may need some experimentation to figure this out, but that's the only one you need to worry about. I call it your worst day habit, meaning even on your worst day, you know that it's going to be better if you do it than if you don't, and it's going to be the easier one to do because it is a habit. I mean easier in terms of your brain trying to keep you safe and predictable isn't going to be freaking out kind of easy, not because doing it is actually easy. Getting up at 4:30 in the morning and going to the gym is never easy. Some days I'm excited about it and it doesn't feel as hard, but it's still waking up earlier than I would if I wasn't setting an alarm, okay? And consistently anyway. There are days that I just naturally wake up a little earlier than that. Few things is frustrating as waking up and turning over and seeing it's like 4:15. Ugh. Do I just get up now or do I hit snooze? Anyway, I digress. So, but I know that it's easier in terms of that predictability of the brain. My brain is not going to freak out if I take that one on. In fact, it'll set it into motion into being more susceptible to the other things I want to build in my life to be able to create a better reality. So, figure out what yours is. I've found a couple patterns. One is it's usually one of the first things that you do. Or it might be one of the last things you do. I have clients where their cornerstone habit is something they do before they go to bed, something they do before they go to sleep, something they do as soon as they wake up, something they do an hour or two after they wake up. But it usually seems to be really close to the way we finish our day or the way we start our day. Now with that, that's not completely exclusive, okay? These are like the Pirates Code in Pirates of the Caribbean when Barbossa said, they're more like guidelines, okay? These are not hard, fast rules. These are guidelines in terms of finding your cornerstone, in terms of where you should start looking to find this. But most people, it's going to be something you do at the beginning of the day or something you do at the end of the day. Beginning of the day being most common. But I do have some clients where it's something they do in the middle of the day. That is the cornerstone, the consistent block in the corner of their life. So consider it. It's not a matter of what it's supposed to be. I know a lot of people that do devotional to take care of the spirit side in the morning. They connect with their creator, with their God, and they have, really build intentions around that and build deeper connection. That doesn't mean that that's your cornerstone habit, because there's a lot of variables involved. Now, a lot of us have been taught that that should be the top priority in our life, and I'm not going to argue with that. I have no problem with that, but it may not be your cornerstone on your worst day habit. Your cornerstone habit is what allows that to be your top priority, because you know that if you don't take care of your cornerstone habit, if you don't have it in place significantly, it's a lot harder for you to take care of your priorities. So don't confuse the two. It's not a matter of your cornerstone habit being your top priority. It's the one thing that you can rely on the most. It's the one thing you know that and it might be only by a small margin, that if you take care of that, everything else will be in place. The reason that one of the reasons that a cornerstone habit is so important is so that when, S hits the fan, that you make sure that, like, for example, if heaven forbid, like a plane was going down and your kid was next to you, you'd want to grab onto them. That would be your top priority, to hold on to them and keep them safe. Anything you could do, okay? It's the same thing in your life. Your cornerstone habit's going to be the first thing you're going to want to consciously grab onto when things get hard, because life's kind of designed to do that. There's a lot of different variables. All of us are playing reality bumper cars with each other, thinking our reality is more superior or more enlightened than someone else's, whether we admit it or not. Or we created such an amazing experience in our reality, and now we're trying to force that reality on everyone else because we think it's going to make their life so much better. Then we end up alienating their reality with our reality. It just gets so complicated. Life is going to happen. It's going to be hard. So you're going to want to be ready with your cornerstone habit, so that when you get out there on the battlefield of your life, that you remember what I shared that I was taught by one of my mentors, Jason Cisneros, commander's intent. Your cornerstone habit, grab onto it. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. Just figure out what it is for you. A lot of us have been taught that it's supposed to be this or it's supposed to be that. Some of you may have a business cornerstone habit, where if you can get up and early in the morning, you always have this in place or this report to look at or whatever it is. that it just sets everything else into motion. It frees up, allows you to not take yourself so seriously, makes your other cornerstone habits accessible. Because then once you figure out what the cornerstone habit is, if it's health, or if it's your spirit, or it's business, or it's your mind, okay? You figure out what yours is for you and get it in place, get it locked in. You know that on a tough day, that's the only one you need to worry about. And then as it starts becoming more and more of a habit, then you can build in the second one. And then as soon as that starts to get built in, then you can build in the third one. It doesn't mean you're not doing anything in between this space. Okay? It just means that you're not sacrificing this one for this crap, for this stuff. You're always making sure that this one is in place. And then when you're ready to build this one, okay, which will be another one of these 4 categories, it's going to feel similar to the cornerstone, but it's going to be the cornerstone in the next category you care to go for. So maybe yours comes from mind. There's something about taking care of your mind, study, meditation, reading, whatever it is, watching TED Talks, who knows? Whatever it is for you, it's mind, but the next one you want to take on is spirit, your energy, your connection to a higher power, whatever it is. The next one you'd want to take on is spirit. Well, you're going to apply the same principles. What is the thing now within this that is the cornerstone? So you've got your cornerstone, the cornerstone, and now you're going for what is the cornerstone in, if these were quadrants, in this quadrant. So this one for me is health. The cornerstone for me is getting up at 4:30 in the morning, going to the gym and working out. Okay, pushing my body beyond what I think it's mentally capable of, wanting, and also taking care of it. I don't just go and grab, weights and I've learned to take care of myself. I've learned mobility. I've learned stretching. I've learned all these different things. I don't do them perfectly, but that's a big part of it in terms of this cornerstone and getting it more and more solid, is really expanding that and keeping it conscious, keeping it intentional. Thank you. And then we might figure out that this one we want to be spirit. So what is the cornerstone of the spirit quadrant? And then what is the cornerstone of the business quadrant? For you, what is the cornerstone for the, what do we have left? Mind quadrant. And now that you've got those in place, you can start to build them out accurately and with precision. Those are the 4 most important habits that you can build. First and foremost, your cornerstone habit. And then the cornerstone habits of each of the other quadrants in priority. The first one, it's not about which one is priority, other than which one is it that will align everything else. Everything else in my life, spirit, business, mind, comes from getting up early and going to the gym. Does it impact my spirit? 100%. Does it impact my business? Absolutely. Does it impact my mind? Is that kind of wrapped up in there? Yes, but the focus of it, okay, the practical application of it is my health, to exercise. And that's a big thing for me. So figure out what yours is. It will serve you really well. And if you're trying to add other things into your life and you haven't gotten your cornerstone in place, then you're probably having some challenge. Because what we might do is, okay, now I'm going to the gym. Now I want to focus on how I'm eating. But we haven't taken care of this cornerstone and this cornerstone and this cornerstone. Now just having this one in place is going to benefit how you're eating, but it may not be perfectly constructed until these ones are in place. Then once these ones are in place, then you can come and build the next one here, and then build the next one here, and build the next one here, and build the next one here. And we might be exchanging what some of these foundational pieces are. But when we've got our cornerstones in place, we've got a higher level of awareness, we've got greater capacity in our metacognition, and we're building the cornerstones to our better reality. Okay? All right. Woo! Threw a lot at you guys. Sorry I didn't get a chance to catch up on the chat. I wanted to make sure that we get an opportunity to get through this information, especially some of the stuff, the things I wanted you to hear early on. So grab something from this. Don't try to grab all of this, okay? I have a whiteboard that I've erased now 4 or 5 times today because it got filled up with stuff. And one of the big reasons we record this is because the speed of my brain isn't necessarily the speed that you operate at. But also remember that there's only one or two things you needed to grab from today to make a massive difference in your life. In fact, trying to grab all of it probably won't make any difference at all. So just find one or two things that you can stew on, you can think about, that can impact the quality of your energy, that can impact the decisions you're making for a better reality, and can impact finding your cornerstone habit. Keep it simple. Thanks everybody for being on today. Have an awesome day. We'll see you next week. Take care.